Hi, and welcome back to Learning in Real Time. I'm Melissa, and I think I have this figured out right now. I have my wired mic, so hopefully the sound is better. When I was editing it last week, I noticed that there was no hum, there was no high-pitched noise, So I'm super excited about that, and I'm excited now that I have a wired mic, so hopefully my voice can be even clearer in this episode. I'm super excited to dive into this topic that I have today that I've really researched, I've really explored within myself and tried to understand within myself. It's something that especially one aspect of it, I've been struggling with, trying to understand for like 8 years now, trying to say, hey, how can I overcome this? Or how can I work through this? Or how can I understand this better to know exactly what's going on and why I'm feeling the way I'm feeling? And I kind of briefly mentioned it last episode where it was about conflict and how one person has an experience and then another person has an experience and they both have emotions and everything that come together, and that's what creates the conflict. And so it's the internal experiences that we each have. We each have our own unique internal experiences that happen on a hourly, minutely, weekly, yearly basis that we all are, essentially living inside of our own head. When we have these thoughts that go through, the emotions that have it, the feelings that we feel, all of this is these internal experiences that we have. And I've noticed a lot is that sometimes what I feel and what I want doesn't line up with what I think. And so here's an example that I've struggled with is, hey, I want to be a fully present mom for my kids. And yet I also want to run a business or work or do this full time. And so that's where those thoughts of, hey, this is what I feel and this is what I want of being a fully present mom. And yet what I think of, hey, but I also want to be a full-time worker and start my business and do all of this. And they don't always line up sometimes. And yet they both exist at the same time. So what I've looked into and especially when I was in my psychology class way back in college, that is a term called cognitive dissonance. It's where you can hold different thoughts, beliefs, and perceptions all at the same time. So when you hold all of that internally, that's what creates this cognitive dissonance. You have one part of you that knows something, and yet you have another part of you that believes something different. And there's a conflict. Even internally, you have that conflict in yourself. And sometimes it's not even a conflict. It's just have two thoughts that are there that don't align. Or an example is, I want to be someone who is responsible and steady. And then you have another thought of, I want to be a person who has freedom and flexibility. So you have those two thoughts of steady and flexible. And they're at the same time, but they're completely opposite thoughts. Or I want to be a good parent. I'm not good enough at being a parent. Or health really matters to me, and yet I'm not going to be consistent about working on my health. Or I want to rest versus I feel like I should be being productive. And so you have these thoughts that are sometimes opposite, sometimes just not aligned in your internal dialogue that you're having. So why does that really matter? Why does it matter if you have these two consisting thoughts? Because your brain wants consistency. It wants a clear identity on, okay, who is this person that I'm running? You can't have these two thoughts. So what does your brain try to do then when you have these two conflicting thoughts or thoughts that don't align all the way? Some of the things that your brain can do is to resolve it, to say which one of these, or it tries to justify one or the other. And in justifying one or the other, it picks one, or it tries to create an explanation as to why you have these thoughts that are conflicting, why these thoughts are simultaneously are there at the same time. So as your brain does this, as your brain tries to understand what these thoughts are, it tries to be consistent, to have an identity, to understand you, that can sometimes lead to justification or self-criticism or confusion or overthinking. It's your brain's way of coping with what it can do. But then these are the symptoms that happen when your brain is trying to say, these are the two thoughts that don't line completely. And yet when you have the cognitive dissonance, you have those two thoughts that are competing with each other at times. Sometimes it's not even just two different thoughts or a few different thoughts. It's different parts of you that are saying different things. So I have a lot of thoughts going on through my head. I have thoughts constantly, just thinking things, just trying to go through things. I've noticed that my thoughts aren't really random, but I have three pretty distinct voices, let's say, in my head. I have the inner critic, which comes through as harsh, critical, repetitive, through the way that my thoughts are. And then I have inner judge. And the inner judge sometimes measures things, sometimes says you're not good enough, sometimes is you should be better. Those are the thoughts of what my inner judge kind of looks like. And then I have my inner wisdom, which my inner wisdom would come across as more grounded, more calm, more understanding, more let's step back and look at the situation. So I have these three different, let's say, voices that are in my head. So there's also a psychological concept called the parts theory, where your mind isn't just one voice. It's made up of a bunch of different parts, such as my inner critic, my inner wisdom, my inner judge. But there's a bunch of different voices, you can say, or parts of your inner voice that you can have, such as a critical voice, a protective voice, a fearful voice, judge like I do, your wisdom that you have. All of those different voices make up a part of who you are. So then I start to think, why am I sometimes thinking these thoughts? Why are these thoughts coming through my mind? Is it instead to think, which part of me is having these thoughts? Which part of the voice, inner voice that I have, is having these thoughts and bringing them to the surface? I think that's something really important that I've tried to understand about myself. What I'm thinking and what's coming through my thoughts and my mind constantly, it seems like, is sometimes just a part of my inner voice. It's not, this is who I am. And that's another thing I've tried to really understand about myself is these parts and these voices that are my internal voice and what are creating these different thoughts and what are creating these different scenarios and what are creating these two conflicting ideas that sometimes are really hard to look at. They're really hard to say, is this me or is this just an internal voice that I'm hearing? Is this just thoughts that are just coming through my head? Is this my inner critic? Is this my inner judge? Is this my mind protecting me from things? Is it making a distinction between these two opposite ideas or these two identity and belief that don't line up necessarily, which is creating this self-doubt, which is creating this version of yourself? In researching that, I also came across internalized voices, which is basically, where are all these voices coming from? How are we getting all these different kinds of voices, all of these different parts of our inner voice? Where are they even coming from? So these voices are being absorbed through childhood, through adulthood, as a child to an adult, from parents, authority figures, culture, past experiences, as some examples of where we start absorbing this information as to where these voices are coming. So these voices from all of these different places, all of these different people are then turned into dialogue in our mind. And not only are they turned to dialogue in our mind, they become part of our dialogue. And then that dialogue goes from, this is what someone told me, to then, this is just who I am as a person. But then you go back to cognitive dissonance, where it's tension between two beliefs that you have. And then you have parts theory. How are these thoughts showing up? How are these thoughts showing up in my mind? How do I express them? How does this internalize make me feel? And then you have the internalization voices, which is, where are these thoughts and where are these voices, internal voices that you have, and the different parts of the voices that you have are even coming from? And that's where you sometimes have in yourself to say, I have so many different parts of me that are disagreeing, and I don't even know who I am anymore. And I can't even understand myself, and I can't even begin to explain things to people because I can't understand it, and I don't know why I have all these conflicting thoughts. I don't know why I have all these different voices that are presenting themselves on my stage of my mind, my inner mind, my inner voices. And yet I don't even know who I am because some of this dialogue, some of these thoughts, some of these impressions or who I believe about myself is just what's been told to me by people, by authority figures, by culture, by past experiences that I've gone through. And then it translates sometimes into, I don't know who I am anymore. I don't even know what I like anymore. I don't even know what I want anymore. I don't know where I want to go. I don't know who I want to be. And then that creates confusion within yourself, within myself. Try to understand any of it. And then to think, okay, how can I do this? How can I take two conflicting ideas? How can I take all these voices and the dialogue that's been put into my mind? Because sometimes it doesn't even feel like parts. It doesn't feel like there's all these conflicting parts. You might not recognize, like I didn't recognize at first, that there was all these different parts of my mind, that I did have a loud inner critic that is harsh, is critical, is very skeptical of things. And I didn't realize that this was a part of me and that I had this inner voice that was so loud. It just felt like who I was. It just felt like these are my thoughts. This is who I am. The critic feels like truth. The judge feels like identity. When they don't match up, when they're disagreeing with each other or with these thoughts that are disagreeing with each other, sometimes it can feel like something is wrong with me. Something is not right because I can't have these disagreement. I can't have this conflict. I feel so self-critical, or I feel so judgmental, or I feel so lost within myself because I can't explain how all this is working in my head. I don't even understand how it's all working in my head. And so if you can't explain and understand something, then how can you know yourself? And you can feel self-critical. You can feel justified sometimes. You can overthink so many things because you're trying to understand why it is that you have so many different thoughts or conflicting thoughts, or thoughts that don't align, or even thoughts that might not align with who you want to be or who I want to be. I want to be this kind of person. And yet sometimes my thoughts are, I really want to do this kind of thing. And if I do this, I can't really be that kind of person. So then it's hard. And it's hard to separate the voices, to say, this is not me. These are just parts of me. This is just my brain trying to understand, protect me. So that's when I tried to start noticing the patterns of when these thoughts come, how am I feeling in the moment? How is this thought making me feel? What does this make? What am I making this mean about myself with this thought that I have? Okay, and there's a pattern. I notice I feel this way when I have this thought. This certain thing is going on. This must be my inner critic. Something like, you're not doing this right. You're never going to get this right. This isn't how you should be doing it. It comes across a lot with me as anxiety of, oh, I feel very anxious about this because I don't feel like I can get it right. I don't feel like I can do it right. I don't feel like I am ever going to get this, or I don't feel like I can achieve or grow or move towards any of this. And it's paralyzing sometimes to realize and think that. But then to sit back and say, hey, this is just my inner critic talking. This is just a thought I'm having, just my inner critic trying to give me the worst case scenarios, trying to give me everything I need to know so I don't fail, so I protect myself. And then in noticing that, it's then, okay, which part of me is speaking? The inner critic, the inner judge, my wisdom, maybe. And I sometimes with my wisdom, it's like this tiny little voice on the side of the stage that barely can talk, really. And that's what it felt like for a long time. And I've tried to nurture that and grow that and listen to that more, where it's gotten bigger and more vocal, and where my inner critic has gotten quieter, or if it's loud, I just dismiss it. But once you notice the pattern, once you can say, hey, who's speaking? Which part of me is talking like this? And then to notice things inside of me and the way I feel don't match up with what I think or with what I'm doing. And when I notice the pattern, notice what it is in my mind that's thinking that, notice how that makes me feel, which parts don't match, and which parts don't match about who I want to be. If someone keeps telling me, this is who you are, this is who you are, this is who you are, and yet that is not who I want to be, that is not a voice that I want to listen to. That's a judge, that's an inner judge of me believing that this is who I am because of maybe past people or past experiences. Or even past repetitive thoughts that I keep saying to myself over and over and over again. And the more I say it, the more I think it, the more I start believing that this is who I am. Just like authority figures, just like people. They tell you things over and over again, and you start just believing that's who you are and that's who it's a part of you. The same thing you can do with your own mind. You can tell yourself these thoughts over and over and over again. And as you tell yourself the thoughts, that's who you either become or make yourself what you believe about yourself. So instead of immediately believing what these internal voices are saying to me, and instead of trying to listen to the loudest voice that's in my head at the moment, I'm trying to step back and say, which one of these voices is on stage right now? Which one of these voices am I listening to? Which part of my mind is this? And is there any external voices that have caused me to believe this thought? And then, is this a thought that I really and truly want to believe about myself? And I'm trying to recognize that and trying to see, is this who I want to be? And even when you have those conflicting thoughts, like, I want to be someone who's responsible and steady, and I want to be someone who's flexible and has freedom. Even those two internal thoughts that you have, that you can even recognize, okay, is there a voice that's attached to this? Is there an external dialogue that I've now adapted to myself about who I want to be or who I should be? Is it a cultural thing? Or, yeah, I want to be a present mom that's always there for my kids, or I want to work all the time. Okay, is there a cultural thought that's attached to one of those? Is there a cultural dialogue? Is there a cultural belief that's then attached to one of these thoughts? Does it have to be one or the other? Do I have to be 100% fully present for my kids? Do I have to be 100% fully working full-time on something that I want to do? You have to always be responsible and steady. Do you always have to have freedom and flexibility? Or can you look at these two thoughts, understand where they're coming from, look at these two beliefs, understand where they're coming from, and then to say, okay, this is from this is from that. How can I reconcile those two thoughts? Or how can I reconcile this belief about myself? Or how can I reconcile the self-doubt, the self-criticism, the overthinking, the confusion that I'm having? How can I understand that? How can I bring these thoughts, bring that thought, bring that belief to then understanding more about myself, understanding who I am, who I want to be, and who I can become without all these loud voices in your head. And I feel like with me, I need to sometimes quiet them, quiet the voices to say, I just need to step back. Now let me explore this. Let me understand myself. Let me see what I even really want. And that's something that I've tried to do. And that's something I've tried to do the last 8 years with what I struggled with and am struggling with and am working through and am progressing towards. And I would love to hear if any of you have the same thoughts, the same inner thoughts that you're struggling with, or voices that are conflicting, or even beliefs that you have about yourself that you've had for a long time and that are hard to understand and hard to grasp or capture or even explain sometimes. Or if you have any other thoughts or ideas and the ways that you deal with it and how you deal with these conflicting voices, or how you deal with beliefs that you've had about yourself for a while. And I would love to hear any of those. Thank you so much for listening. I'm grateful that you are here. And if you have any questions, comments, let me know. I would love to chat with you and talk with you. So I will talk with you next week.